Okie dokie artichoke. So we just got the director's cut from Luke Smith today. Excuse me, I have to clear my throat a little bit. And I've got a little bit of a video here to talk about some of the changes that are coming, talk about some of the philosophies and ideologies behind some of the future goals of the Destiny franchise, and I'm really excited about the perspective that has been lent to us, the community, going forward with the philosophy that's driving the future content of Destiny 2. I'm somebody that plays a lot of Destiny 2 just in general. I focus on getting the best rolls that I can on weapons, the best rolls that I can on armor, and I focus on that for the sole purpose of doing well in whatever activity it is that I decide to pursue in the game. Now, oftentimes I do lend myself to using things like pinnacle weapons. Like in the background, I'm using Revoker as a sniper. It's the Crucible pinnacle weapon. No longer is a thing that Bungie is doing is making the pinnacle weapons, and Revoker is a very powerful weapon. It's probably the best sniper in the game for PvP. That's what it's designed to be. So yeah, even in activities where there are competing weapons or archetypes, they do have to compare against things like pinnacle weapons for comparable power, and that means the legitimacy of their use in the type of activities that I tend to play in, which is a lot of PvP for the most part. So what some of the things were touched on in the director's cut were the philosophy of phasing weapons out of the power pool. So weapons will have a power or light enabled cap, or a limit to which you can upgrade them to as far as their levelable light value, which will reduce their efficacy in activities like PvE. It was also mentioned that some weapons will not be, or some activities will have light enabling. This was a little bit of a mention outside of that, but things like Trials of Osiris will have light-enabled PvP, and things like Iron Banner are also light-enabled PvP activities. So that means that in activities like Iron Banner and Trials of Osiris, these same principles will apply, because it has to do with how you level up a legendary weapon, and legendary is the key word because they're not going to be affecting the efficacy of exotic weapons. Exotic weapons, I think this is a great change, is they're limiting the amount of the power that the legendary items are having in the sandbox. If there becomes too much of a stringent meta where only everybody ever uses, like Thorn or whatever, then maybe that'll have to come into play, but that depends mainly on the balance of the general sandbox. So I think one of the things that I really like about this is it doesn't take away your ability to use items in the game from certain activities, right? Like, if I really like using Revoker, I can use Revoker anytime I want in PvP. But if I want to take it into like a light-enabled PvP activity, like Trials or Iron Banner or something else, then I might have to think about what sniper I'm using in that activity based on where I'm at in the future content, based on the ability of my of me to level up the light value of that weapon. So I think that's an interesting balance, and it also doesn't remove things like exotic weapons either at the same time. So I think that that's a really interesting change. It's sunsetting, but it's a balanced form of sunsetting. It's not saying that you can't use the weapon anymore, which is what traditional sunsetting is, but it's also not saying that you can use this weapon forever, and that kind of reins in the power balance of PvE and PvP. I think that's a great democratization of the argument for both, and I think it's a fantastic solution. I really am excited about it. So that's going to be fun to play around with. I think it's going to mix up the sandbox quite a bit. But we also got some information regarding Trials through some lateral sources as well, that Trials is going to be a light-enabled PvP thing. But there also was mention that Bungie and just Bungie in general is looking to make certain weapons be really strong again. So previously in other seasons we had what was called pinnacle weapons. That was part of the spiel that I was talking about. And the pinnacle weapons went away. They were fixed roles, which kind of placated a certain group of players that play very high degree PvP, that are very skilled, that want to be playing in a sandbox where they understand and know exactly what it is that they're up against, not having to analyze a specific role that somebody has to determine what range they can engage their opponents at. That's a level of PvP that I am not privy to playing at. I'm not that skilled, and I honestly do not care about PvP that much. But there are players that do, and a lot of people sung praises for the pinnacle weapons because they offered that degree of consistency, whether to play with or play against. The vast majority of the community had problems with a lot of the pinnacle weapons because they were either unachievable for the average player, or they were just too good that they couldn't compete against them in the hands of the actually high-skilled players, which made them even more unachievable. And then there were some others that were dominating PvE and were requisite for PvE and high-end PvE challenges and things like that, and that created a lot of tension and discontention in the community. So they reined in the power potential of those pinnacle weapons. But now it looks like, with Trials coming back, it sounds like, and also the subtle hints that were placed in the director's cut, that they're wanting to put an emphasis on powerful legendary items. That means that we're going to be getting those powerful potential items in the sandbox again, whether that be just auto rifles or something that are spitting outside their normal range capacity, or maybe there's different damage modifiers for different weapons, or maybe there's just ultra sticky weapons that just have perfect aim assist on archetypes of weapons that you're just not used to, or maybe there's just a little bit more special sauce put into a hand cannon, right, like an Aya's Luna. You never know. So we're getting that kind of power back. But it's going to be in a new sandbox where that power is going to be attached to that whole new leveling system, and that phasing leveling system, and in light-enabled activities that's going to impact what weapons get used over, I think it was mentioned, like an 8 to 10 month cycle, something like that. So you'll have like 2 or 3 seasons to play with these hyper-aggressive, hyper-powerful items in light-enabled activities, or where your light is reasonable to go and do like the PvE activity, right? But probably not in things like the Master Nightfall or whatever, Grandmaster Nightfall, something like that. I don't know. So we're gonna have to play that and find out. There's also, since we did get the mention of Trials, there's also just, the fact that we will have to play in PvP to acquire some of these items. I'm sure that there will be some PvE versions of it. We had some pretty strong PvE versions, and also PvEvP versions, like with the Gambit pinnacle weapons. Hush is still one of my favorite weapons in the game. Delirium, one of the most powerful machine guns in the game. And if you're looking at just general strength, some of the PvE weapons were really good. I think there was... what was it? It's Wendigo. That's what it is. Wendigo is a very strong, heavy weapon that you can use in PvE, and that weapon alone offers a player not only power, but unique power, because it has the blinding effect, but also a high damage threshold as well. So that's something interesting to keep in mind, that there will be pinnacle or pinnacle-esque legendaries, possibly with random rolls, possibly with fixed rolls, coming from Trials that offer a very high power threshold. So that's going to be the carrot on the stick for Trials, is those weapons, I'm assuming. And it's also sounding like they've got some increased rarity attached to that as well. So the drop rates for certain weapons is probably going to be low, so it's going to require you to keep playing. And that means that the community is going to have to kind of rally around playing Trials consistently to get a hold of those weapons for either excellence in PvP or excellence in PvE. Either way. So it is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I know in previous seasons the Pinnacle weapons really were a point of pain for a lot of people, and Trials on PC with the hacking capabilities and all that, we just have to see how diligent Bungie has been monitoring that to see how that affects Trials. But we're all kind of crossing our fingers that Trials is going to be good. I kind of was suspending my hype for it, but it looks like there's some good reasons